chopping you down, Eagle.
I have a dream.
We shall never surrender.
Tear down this wall.
This is the top defining moments of the decade by History City.
You guys know when you're watching a TV show and not much happened, but they introduce some new plot points. Maybe a fresh new face, but overall it just sets up the rest of the season? That's what this decade feels like from a historical perspective. We're not trying to downplay the suffering and destruction many people went through, but considering what is next, this decade is the TV season setup episode for the 20th century. As the Great Depression was felt around the world was headed on a bad path. The best word to describe this decade is dichotomy. Although there were leaps in human knowledge and capability, it is juxtaposed against a backdrop of social inequality, aggressive territorial expansion, and ideological extremism that would ultimately coalesce into World War II. Despite all the pain the decade would create, there were many cultural landmarks that still follow us today. You could watch The Wizard of Oz in color while you enjoy some White Castle.
There was the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Hello everybody, I'm Jack Murphy and welcome to the 1930s. As a child, I remember my father, who grew up during the Great Depression, telling me some of the stories. They were a family of 6 living in a house that my grandfather had built. His father went to work at dawn on a farm tending potatoes. He got home after dark every night, and his pay was a bag of potatoes every day. My father hated potatoes his entire life. He told me that my grandmother learned to prepare potatoes every way you could cook them. Fried, boiled, hash browns, cold, raw. Potatoes, potatoes, potatoes. My father said he felt like they had absolutely nothing and no hope. He told me that often people would come to their door with their children begging for food. My grandmother, his mother, would make for them sandwiches with mashed potatoes, which they would gladly take. It was a very difficult time in America indeed. What do you think are the most defining moments of the decade? Hit the subscribe button because we couldn't fit everything in this list. Oh, special shout out to this ugly guy, Mussolini and the Dust Bowl.
Number 10.
The New Deal, 1933. The New Deal was a series of federal programs, public works projects, financial reforms, and regulations enacted by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the United States between 1933 and 1939. Designed to provide economic relief, recovery, and reform, the New Deal aimed to tackle the Great Depression's devastating effects, which left millions unemployed and impoverished. The New Deal included various programs and initiatives, such as the Civil Conservation Corps, the CCC, the Works Progress Administration, WPA, and the Social Security Act, which collectively transformed American society. These measures expanded the role of the federal government in the economy and in the lives of citizens, setting the precedent for modern welfare states. With that said, the New Deal wasn't necessarily successful. The economy was still suffering, and as we said, it grew the government in ways the United States is still grappling with today. But the New Deal did something people didn't recognize at the time. It gave the country time to figure things out, and the legislation that was passed in stages gave people faith in the American system. It didn't matter that the New Deal had quick fixes to large societal problems. It just mattered that the government was doing something.
I pledge myself to a new deal for the American people.
Number 9.
Gandhi's Salt March, 1930. Led by Mahatma Gandhi in 1930, this was a pivotal event in the Indian independence movement against British colonial rule. The The 240-mile trek from Gandhi's Sabarmati ashram to the coastal village of Dandi aimed to protest the British monarchy on salt production and taxation. By making salt from seawater at the journey's end, Gandhi and his followers committed an act of nonviolent civil disobedience. The march captured global attention, highlighting the injustice of colonial rule and the power of peaceful protest. It galvanized the Indian population and increased international support for Indian independence, making it a milestone in the broader struggle against British imperialism.
Number 8.
The Spanish Civil War, 1936-1939. The war, which lasted from 1936 to 1939, was a devastating conflict that pitted the Republicans, who were a coalition of left-wing, anarchist, and communist forces, against the Nationalists, led by General Francisco Franco, and largely composed of conservative, monarchist, and fascist elements. The war began after a failed coup attempt by nationalist forces against a democratically elected Popular Front government. What ensued was a brutal and polarizing conflict that resulted in significant loss of life and suffering. The war drew international attention and involvement, with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy supporting Franco's nationalists, while the Soviet Union and international brigades of volunteers backed the Republicans. The conflict served as a precursor and a testing ground for some of the tactics and weapons that would later be used in World War II.
Number 7.
The Munich Agreement. Signed on September 30th, 1938, was a diplomatic pact among Germany, Italy, Britain, and France that allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia predominantly inhabited by ethnic Germans. The agreement is often cited as a classic case of appeasement, the policy aimed at avoiding war by making concessions to an aggressive power. In this case, Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French Premier Édouard Daladier agreed to Hitler's demands, believing that doing so would prevent a larger European conflict.
And are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
The pact was signed without the involvement or consent of Czechoslovakia, a fact that added to its controversy. Chamberlain famously returned from Munich declaring that the agreement had achieved peace for our time, a sentiment that would soon prove tragically misguided. People are often hard on Chamberlain for not recognizing the threat from Nazi Germany. However, you should always hold any country's leader that tried peace in a high regard. Although he tried peace, war was still on the way.
Number 6.
Sino-Japanese War, 1937-1945. The Second Sino-Japanese War was a devastating conflict between China and Japan that started with the Marco Polo Bridge incident and eventually merged into World War II. Japan sought to dominate China for its resources, capturing key cities and committing atrocities like the Nanking Massacre. Though militarily outmatched, China's resistance absorbed significant Japanese resources. The war weakened China's nationalist government and helped the rise of the Communist Party. Japan, defeated in 1945, ended its imperial ambitions and set the stage for its post-war transformation. The conflict had lasting impacts on both nations and reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Asia. Rise of fascism and totalitarianism. The 1930s saw the rise of authoritative regimes across the globe. Adolf Hitler took power in Germany in 1933. Mussolini consolidated his rule in Italy, and militarism grew in Japan. These events set the stage for World War II.
Number 5.
Neutron Discovery, 1932. Here at History City, we're always fascinated with something that may seem insignificant or just another discovery that leads to something big. Although scientists recognize the possibility of this becoming something dangerous, to the layman, it was just another scientific discovery. The discovery of the neutron in 1932 by British physicist James Chadwick was a pivotal moment in the field of nuclear physics and had far-reaching implications for both science and technology. Prior to the discovery, the atom was thought to consist only of protons and electrons. The neutron's discovery completed the picture of the atomic nucleus, allowing scientists to understand atomic structure and isotopes more clearly. Chadwick's work won him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1935 and laid the groundwork for many achievements in the field of physics and chemistry. The discovery was crucial for the development of nuclear reactors and contributed to the understanding of nuclear fission, which later played a role in the development of nuclear energy and atomic weapons. When Chadwick discovered he could split the atom, the road to Trinity began.
He knew the world would not be the same.
Number 4.
Stalin's Great Purge, 1936 to 1938. Stalin's Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror, was a campaign of political repression and mass killings that took place in the Soviet Union between 1936 and 1938. Orchestrated by Joseph Stalin and his allies, the purge aimed to eliminate any perceived threat to Stalin's authority and to consolidate his power. It targeted not only high-ranking members of the Communist Party, but also intellectuals, military leaders, and ordinary citizens. Estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands were executed, while millions more were sent to labor camps, where many perished. The Red Army was also severely affected, as many of its top officers and commanders were purged, leaving the military weakened in the years leading up to World War II. The Great Purge had a chilling effect on Soviet society, instilling a climate of fear and paranoia. Intellectual and cultural life was stifled as artists, writers, and scientists had to navigate an increasingly repressive environment.
Number 3.
Nazi anti-Semitic laws and Kristallnacht. For the record, we said in the 1920s video that you would hear Hitler's name again in this series. The Nazi regime in Germany instituted a series of anti-Semitic laws and actions between 1935 and 1938 that laid the groundwork for the Holocaust. Two of the most significant were the Nuremberg laws of 1935, which stripped Jews of their German citizenship and prohibited them from marrying or having sexual relations with non-Jews. These laws formalized anti-Semitism as state policy and were a step toward isolation of the Jewish community in Germany. The situation escalated dramatically during Kristallnacht, or Night of the Broken Glass, on November 9th and 10th, 1938. Orchestrated as a pogrom against Jews, businesses, homes, and synagogues were vandalized or destroyed. Almost 100 Jews were killed. Thousands were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The event signaled a shift from anti-Semitic legislation and discrimination to organized state-sponsored violence.
Number 2.
Italian invasion of Ethiopia, 1935-1936. The Italian invasion of Ethiopia, also known as the Second Italo-Ethiopian War or the Abyssinia Crisis, occurred between 1935 and 1936. Led by Benito Mussolini, the fascist government of Italy sought to expand its empire and avenge its previous defeat in Ethiopia in 1896 during the First Italo-Ethiopian War. On October 3, 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia without a formal declaration of war, quickly overwhelming the poorly equipped Ethiopian forces.
Number 1.
Hitler invades Poland, 1939. The invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany on September 1, 1939, marked the beginning of World War II for a lot of countries. Without a formal declaration of war, German troops crossed into Poland, quickly overwhelming the Polish defenses with their superior military technology and tactics, and a little bit of methamphetamines. The invasion was swiftly followed by the Soviet Union's incursion into eastern Poland on September 17, 1939. As part of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union that included a secret protocol to divide Poland between them. The invasion had devastating consequences for Poland, leading to the occupation of the entire country and the implementation of repressive policies that resulted and significant loss of life. The event triggered a chain reaction of international involvement, leading Britain and France to declare war on Germany September 3, 1939. If you watch our 1920s list, you are probably wondering, with all these invasions, where is the League of Nations? Shouldn't they stop this? Well, it turns out by 1935, they were useless. Dictators were defying them and the world was coming apart at the seams. They might well have been the League of Nothing, because what was about to come, nobody could have predicted.